Welcome to Tibalt's Apprentice, Luck of the Draw. I know my schedule's been a little infrequent here lately, but there is more Commander and more Arena gameplay content coming up. First of all, I want to say thank you to those subscribers, those new subscribers we've gained over the past month or so, and a huge thank you to those that have continued to be subscribed to the channel. So like I said, we've got more Commander stuff to look forward to. I think the next Commander COVID Diary, I guess that's what I'm calling these, until we can get some more guests in the studio. The next one is Wart the Raid Mother, so look forward to that. This one, I'd mentioned before, is Ghoulcaller Gisa. And the reason that it breaks my heart to talk about this deck or to make any changes to this deck is because this is the deck that proved to me that budget was not an issue. Budget MTG decks, of course, is where I got the initial list. I may have made some changes to it along the way here. I'll actually need to put this in and see. But yes, my point being the fact that I got a chance to talk to David when they were still putting out new content. I think you can probably click up there to see the interview that I did with him. He was great, taking some time to talk to me about what it went to come up with a good deck. And this Ghoulcaller Gisa, like I said, proved to me that you could beat other non-budget decks with a budget deck. And I say proved to me, not just showed me, it proved. And so, well, let's just get into this deck and what it works and how it works for me. I've got three different sections to talk about. First of all is casting ahead of the curve, setting up your end game, and then the blindside win. So with that in mind, Ghoulcaller Gisa is our card. I probably don't need to talk about Sol Ring. It's in every Commander deck. There's a reason for that. But a card like Charcoal Diamond is a good one, obviously, to get you ahead of your curve, to get you more black mana. But more importantly, I feel like Jet Medallion is a better card, or another card to include. The fact that it gives you a minus on all of your black spells comes into play later in the game, whereas with a Sol Ring or a Diamond, you get that initial boost of mana. This applies to all the spells that you cast. So if you have more mana, you cast more spells, and you get more of a discount. Another card that's in here that I almost want to say works against you. Well, it has to be used tactfully, subtly. That's Thought Vessel. The fact that Thought Vessel actually means you have no hand size limit, it can be kind of a hindrance, because in this deck, you want things going into the graveyard. And one of the easiest ways that you can get things into the graveyard is, well, by drawing or having more than 7 cards in your hand at the end of the turn, easily allowing you to throw cards away. Cards of your choice. There are other sack outlets in here, so that's why I keep that in this deck, because it is useful for the extra mana, but it also has to be used judiciously. Something else like Bantu's Monument? Did I say that right? I don't know. May not have been available when this deck was initially designed by budget MTG decks. And I can't even say this deck. Well, I could say the Ghoulcaller Gisa deck. And why don't I actually, if I did that right, include the link up there to the original deck that I found and I initially built. Anyhow, this is kind of why I'm doing these COVID diaries, is because, like I've said, all of my decks are living decks. And so they should grow and change. I don't just retire them, and it's fine if you do. I feel like I need to actually cycle through them. got a chance to play with the Core 4 here this past week, which was fun. And I actually had a couple of epiphanies there. I think we've all determined that I'm kind of slow when it comes to Magic. After 25 years, I'm just now trying to get good at the game. Anyhow, my point was, one of the first things when you sit down to a game of Commander is mind your own business. I don't mean that as rude as it maybe sounds, but when you initially sit down to a game of Commander, you're not sitting down to play Archenemy, or maybe you are, or maybe it turns to that. But a couple of examples of what happened when I was able to actually step away from the game in my mind and watch it being played is the entire battlefield is not my enemy. Just because something got put down there doesn't mean I have to be the one to deal with it. And this is what I'm saying, mind your own business. If it's affecting you specifically, then deal with it if you have to. But if it's a minor nuisance, don't worry about it. Let somebody else handle it. So often I've got into a habit of thinking that I need to do everything. I need to clear the battlefield. I need to control it. I don't need to do that. I need to win, and I need to set myself up to win later on. For example, I don't have the card right here. Maybe it will appear over there. But a card was played that forced me to bounce creatures once, bounce a land every time a creature was played. It was actually an advantage for me. I had 4 or 5 mana on the table. My spells didn't cost much more than that, so I knew I had an extra mana every turn. So it kind of worked out on my favor. The other epiphany I had, and I'll get back to talking about the cards in just one second, but the other epiphany that I had while playing is I sat there staring across the board or the battlefield at an army of Edgar Markov clones, or not clones, but vampires that had been made on his behalf. And I thought, man, that is just overwhelming. I got to do something about that. And it hit me, no. My enemy has 40 life. That's what I need to take care of. Forget what's on the battlefield. If they're not rushing at me, who cares? It doesn't have to be intimidating. If I just hit him for 40 points, he's not in the game anymore. Anyhow, I've gotten off the topic. What I was talking about was cards to get you ahead of the curve while playing Magic. We've been through the obvious ones at this point. Bubbling Muck is a card that is played at sorcery speed and does give something of the same advantage to everybody else at the table. But since this card only plays black mana in swamps, it usually works out in my favor. And since it is a sorcery, it's on my turn, and unless they have instants that require black mana, it's probably not going to help them as much. Another card that gives me advantage and puts me ahead of the curve as far as playing is Undead Warchief. If I was to look at this as being a early game piece or a mid game piece, it could be mid game or even end game. But the idea of playing zombie spells and having them cost 1 less colorless to spend is worth it and puts you ahead of the game. If you're casting things before or faster than your opponents, you get to your middle game so you can get to your end game faster. And so that Undead Warchief is highly valuable. The fact that he gives your zombies a +2/+1 might mean that you want to hold it to later in the game to play, because we'll talk about zombie tokens, of course, in a little bit. Before that, though, the other 2 cards that I have to get me ahead in the game, and again, this value is exponential. It's great if I get them out early. It gives me a little bit of a lead. But even if they come out mid-game, their benefit is exponential. Magnus of the Coffers and Black Market are the 2 cards that I put in this section, getting ahead of the curve. So the second section that I have here is setting up the end game. So we're to the midpoint in the game. doesn't necessarily mean that we're 7 or 8 turns in, or well, a lot of games close out by turn 10. So it can be as much about the battlefield and what's out there as opposed to how many turns you were into the game. Again, if you have enough mana and so on, you might find yourself entering a middle or an end game stage before your opponents, and that's what you're trying to do. The way I establish the end game, though, the way I set it up, in theory, is by getting out threats early that can be used later in the game. For example, Strata Scythe, a card that once on the board is a little hard to get rid of unless they have specific artifact removal. When I'm setting up my end game, it's in the middle of the game, and it's done with things like enchantments and artifacts that are a little more difficult. Enchantments are probably the most difficult things to get rid of. Not that there aren't enough things that remove permanents and stuff, it's just often people are interested in doing big splashy things in Commander. I mean, that's part of the fun of it, but artifact removal sometimes gets forgotten, and enchantment removal almost always gets forgotten. At least that's what it seems in my games. I don't know. Leave a comment down below and let me know if things happen differently in your game. Lash Writhe is another one that not only gives you a body, and again, that 0/0 germ body can be augmented and actually moved off of there. So don't forget about germs. Seems appropriate with the COVID thing, right? Phyrexian Reclamation is one of those enchantments that I was talking about that establishes value that you can find as you go deeper into the game. Grave Betrayal is another one that once on board can be difficult to deal with and is a general threat to everybody else that's still playing in the game. Necromancer Stockpile, Graft Harvest, Whip of Erebos, back to, well, I guess that's a legendary enchantment artifact. So it fits into a couple of categories. But a good thing to have on the board, and since it has a value that goes all the way across that gives all of your creatures lifelink, excellent in this deck. Other cards that give you value and set you up for the end game, in my opinion, at least the way I'm talking about it here. Pontiff of Blight, giving you life. Life is a resource and can be a resource. So why not use it, and why not get a little bit more every time? Incremental, that's fine. Graveborn Muse gives you card advantage. And card advantage, I feel, sets you up for the win. If you've got more options and more chances to do things, have wider variety of answers in your hand, obviously you're going to be doing that much better. A lot of what I'm saying is completely obvious, but you maybe need to be reminded, or at least I sometimes need to be reminded of these strategies and these things to keep in mind. It was nice being able to sit down, like I said, with my core 4 and us playing, and not being obsessed with the idea that I had to win actually gave me a chance to think about the game and meditate on it while playing it. That's a big step for me. Anyhow, Corpse Augur, again, we're back to gaining value by getting more cards. And Squelching Leeches, again, mid-game piece that sets you up for that end-game win. All of those things, however, have hit the battlefield, and people now have the advantage or the ability to prepare for it. So, with this deck, I think it's important that you can blindside a win. Well, there's really only one card in black that almost guarantees you that blindsided win, and that is, of course, Gary. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Gary as we affectionately refer to him. But I've got a couple of other cards in here that work well together or can set you up for a win that have maybe been forgotten or not used that much. For example, Empty the Pits. The idea that you can cast at an instant speed and get creatures back on the board to attack gets you past that ability that you've set up your board state and everybody can see it coming. It is kind of pricey, but we talked about why we get extra mana and why we have extra cards in our hand and so on. Because this has Delve, we don't mind those cards going into the graveyard. This is why I mentioned it earlier, that the maximum hand size and having to deal with the, where is it at here? The Thought Vessel can be kind of tricky, so keep that in mind. Anyhow, Empty the Pits. Because you do get a lot of tokens, another surprise win condition is Vizier of the Scorpion. How is that a surprise, or why is that a surprise? Because it's a creature that you're going to play. It comes down on your turn, but the effect that it has is all of your zombie tokens have Death Touch. So all those things that you just got back with Empty the Pits now have Death Touch and suddenly are much greater threat than what they were at the beginning of your turn. Zombie Trailblazer is another card that I haven't seen a lot of people play that I think is high value. Again, you get the advantage by tapping untapped zombies that you control for a couple of different things. And you notice there are no tap symbols next to this. Or that is, there's no thing that forces you to deal with summoning sickness, I guess is the point. And of course, being able to discard cards, I'm probably going to say it every single episode. Incarnations, they're awesome. And Filth, giving you Swamp Walk, is always great. Because, well, you can make other things swamps when you have the Zombie Trailblazer on there. So anyhow, those are some of the fun interactions for this deck, some of the cards to look for. I'm sure I missed a ton of them. What would you be playing in your Ghoulcaller Gisa deck? What did I miss? And what would you like to see on this channel going forward? I do appreciate all the subscribers that I have, new and old. And I want to make this a community where we can share our thoughts back and forth. Again, this was initially intended to be not so much about Tibalt's Apprentice, not so much about me, but me interviewing other people and getting their ideas and thoughts on the game. So I encourage you to share those with me in the comments down below. You can also find me on Twitter. You can join us on Facebook, any number of places. In the meantime, thanks for joining me.